What's up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 411. We have a fun show for you tonight as we sweat our bodies off in this hot office. Our guest is in air conditioning. He looks great. So we're going to slowly melt while our guest just laughs at us. We're so excited. David Roche is joining us back on the show today for another Ask Coach Roche. We're going to talk a little bit about Leadville. He coached not only the first place female, but 1, 3, 5, 9, 13. He's going to correct me, but literally 20 spots in the top 30 he is the coach for, he and Megan. So we're going to talk to him a little bit about how Leadville went from a coaching perspective and how he coaches athletes of different abilities through a big 100-miler like that. And we're going to preview a little bit of UTMB because David also has a number of clients that are going to be at UTMB. All that in addition to answering your questions. Every time we have David on the show, it is such a gift because he answers all of your training questions, running questions, racing questions. He's one of the best coaches out there in the business. So sit back, relax, everyone. Ginger Runner Live with David Roche begins now.
Ginger Runner.
Yay! What's up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 411. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy Tuesdays to spend a little bit of it with us. Hi, Kim.
Hi.
How are you?
Doing well. Little spicy.
It's a little hot in here. Our temperature here in the Pacific Northwest has been hot basically all summer. We've never really had a break from it, and today's no different. But our guest is in some cool air-conditioned quarters, and so he's going to be ready and ripe to answer all of your questions. David Roche is joining us on the show. Yeah, I don't know why I said ripe.
I think you know.
It's David Roche. He could very well be ripe. But we're so excited to have David on. It's a gift anytime he's on the show because he does answer all of your questions, running questions, training questions, racing questions. So if you have anything that you've been trying to solve in your own journey right now, ask away in the chat. We're also going to talk about Leadville. We're going to talk about UTMB. It's going to be a lot of fun. But before we introduce David, we have the wonderful Kim.
Hi. Yay. Thanks. We're clapping now, huh?
Might as well. You did complete hamster, 32-hour, third place female.
Yeah.
I know we talked.
So now I get claps. Okay.
You do get claps.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Kim Tashima Newberry here. As always, if you're new, come say hi in the chat. Active chat room going on right now. People noticing the logo if they weren't here, I guess, last week or in Daily Brew. Yeah. Yes. New logo. Very cool. And as Ethan mentioned, if you have questions for our wonderful guest, David, ask him in the chat.
And again, before we introduce our guests, we do have individuals we like to thank. That's the GR crew. It's because of them they're able to do these shows every single week, as well as our daily live streams that we call Daily Brew. We actually have a thing that goes right there for Daily Brew shows to prove that we actually do them. Plus our reviews, our films. It is because of the GR crew that we're able to do this. So a huge shout out to that community. You can join the community. Head on over to patreon.com/thegingerrunner. All tiers there get access to some super fun perks, including discount codes and live streams and a peek behind the curtain at everything that goes on here behind the scenes. One individual in particular at the top tier we like to shout out at the beginning of Ginger Runner Live just because he's been a longtime supporter of everything we do, in addition to many other ultra runners out there who are, whether they have Patreons or whether they have YouTube channels. He's just a fantastic support for so many in this sport. Brian Sands. So big shout out to Brian Sands. We appreciate you, buddy, and can't wait to chat with you again. We get to chat with him every month as well, so that's really exciting. I just want to get our guest on here because he's been so patient. We've had him on the show a number of times. He is our most frequented guest on Ginger Runner Live, but that is also because he is one of the most profound and also heartfelt, honest, and truthfully one of the best humans on earth. David Roche is joining us, and here he is.
Yay! Thank you so much for having me. I want to start by saying, Kim, you are a freaking badass. Congrats on the hamster race. You absolutely freaking slayed. And I mean, it's an honor to see that journey unfold. And it's just amazing to think about where that brick will lead, once you start stacking it up even more. So it's just the start, but it's a damn good place to start celebrating too.
Thanks, David. I appreciate you and your coaching. I think it just, helped reinvigorate me to, pulling it together and getting out there for a few more loops the following morning when I was basically a cicada shell laying on the ground.
One thing I do want to point out, so David is our coach. We get to chat with him with our own running journeys quite frequently. But you expressed to me concern, just you're like, man, how am I going to do? I haven't run this long before, all these different concerns that kind of come with a 32-hour event. David, throughout your training process, has always provided support and, proved to you, like, listen, this mileage, these weekly totals, this long run, these will all amount to a great performance on race day. And while you were out there, that's exactly what happened, right? Like, all of the tools that you have at your disposal led to you getting third place female and a fantastic day.
I mean, that was a surprise. The third place female was a surprise.
Yeah, a surprise, but an amazing surprise.
Well, I want to,
Yeah.
I mean, I actually want to jump into, like, Kim is a total beast, but, like, while I do offer support, like, the side that others might not always see is, Kim, I guess it was like 8 or 9 days before or something, I said in her, like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, I just challenged her directly in a way that, like, I think an athlete that was at a slightly different place might have really recoiled from, and maybe she did. I'm not exactly sure, but you responded with so much, like, joy in the process and focus on just being out there and not necessarily the results of it, but just the act of it. And I was so impressed by that.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing to read in my log.
Yeah.
Because I had I did have a couple, like, internal reactions to that. I was like, wait, is he asking me this because he's seeing something that I'm not seeing? And I was like, well, no, yeah, of course I want to do this. I've been, I think the word that we keep tossing around in the house here with regards to racing, with regards to anxiety, is curiosity. And that was kind of the key for me, especially for this race, because there was just a lot of unknowns for me. I didn't necessarily feel like, my long runs were relatively short compared to what maybe like my typical, like a 50-mile training plan you've done for me before. So there's a few question marks, but there was also a few like, well, what if I just go out and have a great day? Like, what if anxiety doesn't hit me? Like, who knows what will happen? And it was kind of cool because this race and then the last race I actually raced, which was WHAM in 2019, both of those races started off very differently for me than races had in the past. Usually it was like, the anxiety to the point of like, I don't even know if I can physically move. These two races it was just a surprise to be like, that's not really there. So this is kind of neat. So yeah.
Well, so proud of you. I mean, the reason I said that is because, like, I knew you were there and I wanted you to come to that conclusion before hour 12 or whatever. And I think that's a good lesson for anyone doing really hard things is, remember, you don't have to do it. And to actually, whether if someone's not there to remind you of that, to make sure you're reminding yourself of it, like, you get to do it for sure. But, like, I think once that pressure gets taken off and this is viewed as, a celebratory moment, you would have been happy, I think, even if you had gone half as far. And, certainly if you weren't on the podium. And, like, I was so impressed with that and so impressed with the journey over time. So I just want to say cheers to Kim. What a great person. What an amazing athlete.
Thanks.
Hell yeah, Kim.
Good job.
Thank you. Paul B in the chat says, I've had a few of those "are you sure" inquiries that made me rethink my why, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
So yeah, very cool perspective.
We obviously have so much that we can cover in today's show, David. And anytime we have David on the show, I feel like we have 10 things to talk about. We cover 3 because we can easily get into the weeds. But I do want to start quickly with Leadville. But before we talk about that, if you have questions for David, drop them into the chat. Kim, you've already pulled a bunch of sites. We'll get to as many of these as possible. So Leadville, David, you have a really unique perspective. One, you live in Colorado, so you deal with altitude. You kind of deal with a lot of the situations that Leadville presents as difficulty for the 100-mile distance. But you also coach a number of athletes, all abilities, all levels, many of which performed incredibly well at this year's Leadville. What are your secrets coming from the coaching perspective? Like, how do you coach someone like Claire Gallagher versus someone maybe mid-pack? Like, are there differences? Let's peek behind the curtain there.
Yeah, well, I try to coach everyone very similarly. Like, I mean, the way we do it in Swap with Megan and I is just everyone is an elite athlete. And so, no matter what your training approach is, make sure that you view yourself and your coach views you as an elite athlete. Sometimes elite athletes are doing 15 or 20 miles a week, but expecting that type of, focus, prioritization, and also fun in the process. So yeah, Claire is one of the best ever. And she requires a certain different type of, like, quantification in her training. But, like, maybe an athlete that is trying to finish this race for the first time, it's the same, they're feeling the same things. They're going through the same physiological processes. It might just be a little bit longer amount of time out there. And so I always try to remember that, like, every single time one of my pro athletes is doing a hill interval, it feels the same exact way as someone that is in their first year in the sport. And anchoring myself in that as a coach is so important. Like, and then I think also it's helpful for the athletes too, to know, hey, there's no value judgment being made by who finishes first. Yes, it's a cool story. And I think it's fun as a fan of sports more generally to have these narratives that play out, particularly at the front of the pack, because you follow them over time. But for every individual, it's about so much more than that. And I mean, that's what's so cool about the sport, is like, we're all united together in a way that, like, LeBron James might not be united with someone that's going down to the rec league and playing basketball for the first time. So that's what I love. And then with Leadville in particular, I mean, I think it's deceptively hard race, because I think the course is flatter. It still has like 14,000 feet of climbing, but
at altitude.
Really conceive of it nearly as much as it actually plays in practice. And so we do the same thing that we do for every ultra, which is we try to get athletes to do a heavier emphasis on vert than on mileage in their long runs in particular, because the eccentric muscle contractions from downhills will make the muscles more resilient, even if there isn't quite as much vert as a race like Hard Rock or UTMB. And so Claire, I think she peaked at 70 miles a week, but a few of those weeks had 15,000 feet of climbing. And so that week played longer and let her achieve that. And then I think basically every athlete kind of did a similar approach. And it seemed to work really well this year, which, part of it was probably a little bit cooler weather, which was helpful. But, it's fascinating to watch these races unfold year after year, because I think, people are really starting to understand ultra training in a way that maybe they didn't 10 years ago. And you're starting to see a depth of performances across the board that is so damn exciting.
That's one of the cool things. I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because we've been in the sport for over 10 years now. It's not necessarily a long time compared to those who've obviously been in ultra a lot longer, but in these short 10 years, we've seen the emphasis on training go from max mileage, 200 plus mile per week. That's how success is designed, spelled, and built, to now we're seeing 70-mile peak weeks in some of these elite athletes, or much more focus on quality versus quantity and specificity in their training. And we're seeing huge successes from that. Do you feel that is the right trend to lean towards? I know that that's your coaching style, so I imagine I know the answer, but why do you think that is?
So I think it's less about that. And, I like to yes and everything, but with this particular thing, like
but me right now.
I'm just
yes
no
but.
No but straight in your face. We had a pro athlete join the team recently, and she was like, I thought swap training was easier. And she's like, oh my God, this is so difficult. And I think the point is, what we do is we're like, no, we don't care about whatever the maximal volume is or maximal numbers we can help an athlete achieve is. What we care is, what is the maximum amount they can adapt to and still have fun in life. And so for Claire, like, we've learned the hard way that after 70 miles, like, her performance has become much more difficult to predict. And so before Black Canyon 100K, which she won this year, I think she only had one 70-mile week. Before Leadville this year, which she won in one run of the fastest times ever, she had a few 70-mile weeks. But that's because Claire is one of the best athletes ever. Her talent lets her do a little bit different style. And as long as she's fast, as long as she's healthy coming in, she'll be ready. A different athlete might be Chris Harrington, who was fifth in the men's race. He was getting up to 90 miles on 6 days. He was doing doubles 3 times a week, often on the treadmill hiking. And that was starting to build up volume a little bit more. So yeah, we're not necessarily going to say anyone go out and do the 150-mile weeks you might see before UTMB for some athletes. But when you look at, like, Matt Daniels training for CCC coming up here, he's definitely hit some, 100-mile, 20 to 25,000 feet of vert weeks, because he can adapt to it. It's what he thrives off of. And so I think the big thing it gets back to everyone, without comparing yourself. Think about, how do I feel day to day? Like, how can I support a context where I feel better and better, or at least like good within the context of these big training blocks? Because one, if you're not feeling good, it's not fun. But two, feeling good is a proxy for adaptation, because even if we can't necessarily measure adaptation in the moment, What we can measure are things like biomarkers. So if you're measuring things like hemoglobin, vitamin D, hormonal levels, we can't predict what those will be. Most people aren't going to get, blood measurements every few days, but how you feel is the best proxy. And if those variables start to get, thrown out of whack, an athlete's not going to adapt. So we have this amazing supercomputer in our head, how we feel. So I think the way I like to think of swap training, or the way Megan and I like to do it, is what is the most we can do while feeling good? And if that number is 20 or 40, great. If that number is 110, that's also great. But that number does vary a ton based on the person. And I don't think the specific number has much bearing on the outcomes. What matters is that the specific athlete is giving them the best chance to adapt.
It makes so much more sense. Because it's going to be an individual thing.
Think about adaptation. Like, I guess, all of this stuff, the body doesn't know any of these numbers we're giving it. They're all proxy variables, right? So 70 miles that we're saying with Claire, some of those weeks were 14 hours. If she was a road runner, that would be way over 100-mile a week for her.
Right.
And that's one of the complicated things about trails. It's like, I see some of the training people are out there doing, and I'm like, think about the amount of time that converts to for this professional athlete. Like, a 25-hour week at 8 miles an hour, like, is a 200-mile week. And so even on Strava, they might be training slower in trails, so it looks like 110. But you're like, fuck, if a road runner did that, they would be laughed out of the room. And I think ultra running is a little different because it can be rewarded. But like, I think only the freaks get rewarded that way long term. And yes, there are genetic freaks that don't play by those rules. But, we have to be really honest with ourselves and honest in coaching about not trying to throw 12 eggs at the wall. And if one doesn't break, being like, hey, look at this amazing egg I created. It's like, no, you created 11 broken fucking eggs.
I already love this discussion.
Is it because you like eggs?
Well, it's because I love eggs. I can't wait to have an omelet. I think he said eggs, and I just that's it.
Omelet.
All I'm hearing is eggs. Omelet. Take it with him.
Earlier in the chat, Eric says, just DNF'd Leadville a couple days ago, but it got to at least the 100K mark, Twin Lakes inbound. I think I doubted myself on the final descent and couldn't push. A great day, though. And Eric, also, you just had it on your screen.
I'm so sorry. I was trying to pull these onto screen. This one?
Yeah. And Eric also followed up saying, thanks, Kim and Ethan, for hosting Coach Roche. Always great. Thanks, everyone, for your thoughts. I thought a lot of the GR crew during the run. It was uplifting and got me past the 50-mile mark.
And I believe in the chat, Eric, I think that was Eric's first ultra, Leadville 100. So we got to 100K for his first ultra at Leadville. So Eric.
Oh my God.
Nice
so
job.
Eric, like, I would die doing what you just did. Like, I can coach this stuff, but I would literally have died trying to do what you just did. I think one of the things we really need to do in the sport in general is not is to uplift DNFs and celebrate them right alongside great finishes. Like, yes, we're pushing for certain things, but like the audacity to get out there to train for it, to get 100 freaking K above 10,000 feet is wild. What an amazing human accomplishment. And I think, if we can start framing this sport so much more around like, okay, how can we create this unconditional culture of celebration within the context of also telling these stories and pushing ourselves, the better. So, I hear about Eric and I'm like, damn, like that's just an incredible achievement that he'll have with him for the rest of his life. And so, yeah, I bet he goes back and absolutely demolishes a finish at Leadville. But this one, how special is it to get out there and, be fighting the cutoffs down Hope Pass, questioning things? It's like, no one lives like that. Like, and, so he went out there and just, it's like, I'm going to inject a whole syringe full of life directly into my veins. And most people go through their life and never experience something like that.
Just total tangent. Eric also says first ultra, first 100, first Leadville, Jeebus. Yeah, Eric, totally. But a little side tangent there. I know Ian Sharman, we've had him on the show a number of times. Great coach as well. I know, David, you and him communicated afterwards too, congratulating one another because I think he got a new coaching staff member or something like that. But Ian had a DNF at Leadville, and that was an unexpected DNF for him. And he's done Leadville a number of times, I think 6 times or something. And it's one of those where I thought a lot about that. I was like, man, I always thought Ian Sharman, never the one to DNF. He had some major health stuff happen during it, so he made the smart decision. But I couldn't help but recognize like how, because he framed it perfectly online, which is this is a learning experience. These are important moments to live through as a DNF. Like rather than I want to avoid a DNF at all costs, it's like no, these are parts of the lessons that we have to learn as ultra runners because it helps you appreciate those good days so much better. And there's just so much to learn. I learned more from my DNF than I think any finish that I have. So I don't know, Eric.
Yeah.
Great job.
How cool is it what Ian did, by the way? Like, so, he was sick. I think he either had COVID or something. And he tried to manage it because he wasn't sure exactly. And at one point he was running with Claire and Addie Bracey, the top two women. And Claire was telling us today on our podcast that he was just supporting her the entire time while they were spending this little bit of time together. And afterwards he goes to the finish line and cheers everyone on. And it's like, yeah, obviously it's disappointing, especially for an athlete at his level that, has won this race many times or multiple times, I think. But also just the coolest sign of the type of spirit we can bring and the type of light we can shine, even when it might be a little tougher. So yeah, cheers to Ian Sherman.
Yeah. So DNFs, I love them. Bring them on. I want to talk about UTMB. Because even if it's just for a few minutes here, we have tons of questions. Do you want to get to a question first?
Yeah, let's get to a question first, since
Last
we're kind of talking about training volume. This question is from Krissa. I know this one might be a little tricky to answer, but Krissa asked, I'm training for my first 100K, and I have a plan that I found online that I'm following. The longest day is a 4-hour run, but the weekly training adds up to 8 to 12 hours a week. Is that enough? So for someone who maybe doesn't have a coach or doesn't have access to a coach, how can they try and figure out how much is enough?
Okay, great question. Well, first to answer specifically before I broaden it out, 8 to 12 hour weekly total, definitely enough. I mean, I still train as a professional athlete personally, and just because I love the process, even though it's not how I identify primarily. And I am never going over 12 hours, like even in high volume training. So that's certainly enough. The one place where I differ a little bit from that plan, and I do think athletes should think about when it comes to volume, is having your long run quantified in time. Because unless your race is in time, you're going to have to cover a certain amount of distance on race day. And so, yes, the chronic training stress that's over time, over the course of weeks, I don't necessarily think distance is the best proxy, but in a specific effort, if you're not like, if 4 hours gets you 12 miles and you're training for a long ultra, that's probably not going to cut it. If 4 hours gets you 23 miles over trails, then it's a little different. So, we like all of our athletes that are stepping up into ultras to do multiple 20 milers. We definitely push. The long runs are where the acute stresses really matter. And if an athlete doesn't accumulate those, I mean, our data is wildly predictive of what we can expect in races. So even with UTMB, when we're looking at how we predict our own athletes, which we always do, it's an exercise we do before every big race, what we think is going to happen, so that Megan and I can calibrate, what we're doing in the future. Long runs, the specific acute stresses are what we look at first. That's what gets the highest amount of weight in our model. And so, with how you're structuring it, I totally love the plan you're on. I would just say, make sure those 4 hours get up. And then, for everyone else, like the amount of basically long-term consistency in the background, even if that's 6 hours a week on average or whatever, or even less, is fine. Just make sure that your training supports the acute stresses that are specific to race day. So for a 50K, you're going to want to do a 20 miler on similar trails to have the best, most fun experience. For a 50 miler, you're going to want to go up to 25 miles or even 50K on similar trails to have a truly uplifting experience. And then, at 100 miles, it's, some back-to-backs and things, but it's highly individual, and, it's okay to play within those limits. Just make sure when you follow cookie cutter plans to account for your own specific constraints.
Excellent info. Want to do one more? Or should we dive in?
Dive in.
UTMB. We're all not there. I know that the background might make you think we're all in Chamonix, we're eating croissant, and we're just enjoying our afternoons on the pastry everywhere. I'm bathing in cheese sauce. We're not there, but of course we can live vicariously through all of our friends and athletes that are over there right now. I mean, without getting too predicty, David, is there anything that, like, any insight you can give us as to who you might be leaning towards based off of maybe what you might know that's off of social media? Like, are there people that are super ready? We should be keeping our eye on this athlete, or are the Americans going to do well this year? Is like, what are we thinking with UTMB? Where's our brain at?
Yeah, I mean, the first name that comes to my mind, I'm going to try to like limit the athletes we coach. I'll throw them in a little bit, but I think that's biased for sure.
Little asterisk.
Athlete we don't coach for women on the women's side for UTMB. I think Sabrina Stanley is set for a truly like amazing day. She is incredible in the mountains. She's been training in Europe. She didn't do hard rock this year. She, I think, is set up to pick up the mantle that Courtney is just, leaving this year. And that's, saying that, like, I think that an American woman might come in and have that type of result. I also think, not going to blow any minds with this prediction, but Marianne Hogan is doubling back from Western States and is such a mountain boss. And she's just so fast, and she's Canadian, so she's delightful. She has it all going for her. So, I think those
Canadians
two
are quite nice, aren't
Canadians they're pretty nice.
They're pretty good.
Nice.
They're also hilarious, which is the best part about
Let's
Canadians.
not get ahead of ourselves. Let's not. Come on now.
And then, so they're not being the normal picks to win. I think like Audrey Tanguay would be the like person I put my money on to win for women for sure. But also Regna Dabots is amazing on the women's side, and Mimi Kotka, who was top podium last year. But yeah, I'm going for the American woman. I'm going for Sabrina Stanley on the women's side. So watch out for her. But then if you want a fun American woman that no one's picking, and you might want to slide into your free trail fantasy picks, is someone I coach named Emily Caldwell. She's a former elite skier. She's podiumed at Run Rabbit Run in her only 100 so far. And she won the Ouray 50 miler, which has 20,000 feet of vert. So it makes UTMB look flat. So I love her as a person. So that's my bias throw in there.
Men's side.
I think the storyline that everyone's talking about is Kilian Jornet versus Jim Walmsley. And that is a place where, if you're going to weigh in, you better bring your data. And so the data I'm bringing is that Jim Walmsley is a freaking monster. Yeah. And, even though Kilian is Kilian, when Jim has set his mind solely to something, there's a 75% chance he does something legendary. And those odds I'm going to take every time. So, I think if the weather is not horrific, which it's looking terrible, I would have picked Jim to course record. I think the weather is the great equalizer here because it's going to be raining all of UTMB and it's going to be thunderstorms on Saturday. So that'll be the complicating factor. So that's where I'm standing. But I also want to throw out, this is biased, but even if I didn't coach this guy, I would be saying, you got to watch out. Scotty Hawker, third at UTMB in 2019, second at CCC last year. So he's rocked these trails many times. And his training his fitness levels are 15% better than they were when he podiumed. So, he's going to be there at the end of this race, and they better have historic days or Scotty's going to be coming to get him. And Addie just got excited because her mom's home. So
I heard the tippy tappy of the feet. I want to go see mom.
Addie actually just got the UTMB course record running down the stairs.
I was wondering. I hope that we see her on I Run Fire. I hope that she gets featured.
I hope she comes back with cheese.
Yeah. Does she come back with cheese and like croissants?
Oh my God, I hope so. But yeah, I think that all of those storylines are over. Well, then Tim Tollefson too. I also want to throw that out. If you want an American that could win on one of those years, watch out for him. And then, there's tons of other, actually one more fascinating American. This is like an Emily Caldwell style thing, is Canyon Woodward. He's the Cruel Jewel 100 mile course record in the Southeast. He set the SCAR FKT unsupported, but he also got the supported record at the same time. And this guy is like a Renaissance man. He wrote a book called Dirt Road Revival that I totally recommend. That's about rural politics. And so he's helped lead a political campaign in Maine for a Democrat that ran in a rural area. And it's essentially saying how to connect in a meaningful way with rural voters. That's, as someone that grew up in a rural area, it's like, wow, this is so brilliant. So he's like a fun one for those of us that, appreciate the The well-rounded athlete.
That's cool. That name wasn't on my radar, but now it is. I want to look into the book and stuff like that.
Oh, he has great flowy hair too. He's perfect for a live show.
There we go. That's one of our
fan setup.
That's one of our prereqs. I'm surprised, David, you knew this prereq. We have a list of like 4 criteria.
Flowy hair is one of them.
It's actually number 2.
Well, Megan says that I have pubes.
That's number 1.
Yeah. I think she's a little worried that our kid might come out and like be like. I think she likes my genetics for the most part, but the one part she's like, "Come on, Megan's hair."
Spoilers, but David is about to be a dad. Him and Megan are expecting a beautiful child here very, very soon. Not like today, but like in the coming weeks, and it's a pretty exciting time for you, David. I know. How's that influenced like coaching at all? Like, are you spending half the day, doctor's appointments, caring for Megan and like doing all that kind of stuff, and then the other half coaching? Like, how has it influenced that?
I spend about a quarter of the day with really flowy wigs on, thinking that my epigenetics might start to reprogram and will reverse engineer a child with Canyon's hair. No, actually, I mean, so Megan's 29 weeks. For those that know, it's still a long time or not long, but plenty of time. And, our approach is, look, we've been through a lot in life. We've done a lot of things. We're going to have as much fun with this as possible. Hopefully, it's like we avoid the really terrible like outcomes that are just so heartbreaking. But within that process, we're just gonna enjoy it. So nothing's changing on our end, though. We're going to pre-record a few podcasts so we have a few weeks of those built in. So for those that listen to our podcast, we're going to have sexy science corners ready to go on different topics. So that'll be the only thing that changes for us. We'll still be tracking races. We'll still be updating training logs. Just might take a day or two off in there.
Excellent. Some Work All Play is the podcast, so definitely add that to your list. If you're listening to this, listen to that too.
We have an interview with Claire Gallagher, our first ever interview after 116 episodes with Claire Gallagher today, who's one of our best friends in the whole world. So I think maybe you get a slightly different side of her, that side that we all see in person. But
did you record it in person? So like, were you in the same? Because I know that she's amazing when you meet her in person. She's great on camera, and like we've had her on the show. She's fantastic, but like in person, I imagine it's like 1,000 times.
It is 1,000. I wish we could have. We're being very COVID conscious because Megan has some health issues.
That's right. Yep.
But so we do see in person, but with the masks, it might make for worse recording. But so is it okay if I just mention one thing I only touched on in passing with UTMB that I think we should mention?
Of course.
The weather this year, I think, is going to be a really important part of thinking about how this race unfolds. So if it is raining, Chamonix rain is delightful, but rain up at 8,000 feet on like Col de Chicot and stuff like that is horrible. And it is like the worst high mountain weather you could experience. So even though it's only 8,000 feet, it plays like US 12K. And if you've ever been up there in a storm, you know how scary it can be. And so it's going to be an interesting dynamic. I think it is going to reward people that have mountain experience a little bit more and understand how to read the mountains, how to understand it, how not to panic, which I think is almost everyone, but it will change it into a little bit less of a track meet. So today I worked with a professor at Stanford to publish a statistics article on UTMB and time predictions. And I was like, dude, I think these time predictions are way too fast, because as much as I think Jim and Killian are going to go at it and people like Sabrina are going to go really fast, like if it's raining like that, it's not going to reward a track meet style. It's going to reward somebody coming from behind.
Yeah.
And so hopefully those people at the front, race smart into the teeth of that weather.
As you were saying that, the only thing I can think of, and I feel like I am biased as well because she's a local favorite.
100%.
Here.
We're both so biased.
But I think we're both thinking the exact same thing. Caitlin Gerben, who is like exquisite in mountaineering and crazy weather. And
that's her specialty.
Reading mountains. That's like, she specializes in that. So if the weather is very gnarly, Caitlin could very well have.
I hope it's gnarly only because I think that really does put athletes to the test. It's such a.
It's like F1 when it rains. It's like everybody equal playing.
It's about driving, right? F1 in rain is driving. F1 normally is like who had the best gas that day. Yeah. And I mean, like food gas. But I'm so excited to see UTMB. If it has rain or some mountain weather, I hope it's not terrible, and I hope nothing further tragic happens. But if there is weather and rain, you're right. Like, it's going to benefit those who have that extra level of confidence, like not panicking and not going, I'm not running my typical speed because what the hell's going on? Being able to just go, great, let's just turn it on, put on a jacket and crank.
Yeah. It also makes thermoregulation very difficult, which becomes a big issue in the second half of these long ultras. Like, anyone that's been there knows that you can be at an ultra that's 90 degrees and people can be shivering.
Right.
And that probably has a strong genetic component that we don't fully understand. And so it's one of those moments where it's really tough to predict how exactly people are going to respond, other than based on their past performances in similar conditions. And, it all might be a moot point, because someone like Jim goes so fast that he might be generating body heat. He might be great on those conditions. And obviously he has plenty of mountain experience anyway, because he's been over there. And so he's just able to blitz the course from the start, and it's not a concern. But it does introduce a variable that's really interesting, especially when, for women, there's probably 30 women that could compete for the podium. And for men, there's probably around the same number that could compete for the podium. And so this is might be the most competitive men's race we've ever seen, one of the most competitive women's races we've ever seen. And that's wild. And what's even more wild in terms of just the weekend is that CCC, the 100K that's happening on Friday, might be, if not more competitive, just as competitive. I think that's right now I think CCC might be the ultra world championship, essentially, in terms of UTMB selects very strongly for mountain monsters. CCC is where everything kind of meets in this sport, and everyone is going to test themselves this year almost. And so I'm almost even more excited for that. Also more excited for that because I feel like UTMB tracking is like tantric tracking. I just can't hold it in that long.
That's a new term.
Tracking.
We're definitely using that in the house from here on out. We're learning so much.
That's the experience of being a fan of this sport. Is you're like, they're running still, really,
still going.
I don't try not to think about it in coaching. Like, in coaching, I understand the physiology. I understand what it takes. I try desperately not to think about like hour 23 when you have, a 6,000 foot descent coming, because it turns me into like, my empathy makes me into a bad coach. So yeah, it's wild. And, I think CCC is a really fascinating race this year, because it's becoming more and more every single year, this huge proving grounds for athletes that are stepping up from the short distance skyrunning series all the way to, some of the best 100-mile racers in the world. And they're all coming together in one spot. And, that gets me super duper excited for like what's possible out there. And so, I less on the predictions for that, but I would just say, watch that race, because the camera coverage of it is great, because most of it happens during the day. And you're seeing live action moves of people becoming legends, which is so fun.
It's such a transitionary race from like 50K skyrunning world-class stuff to that high end mountain ultra long distance stuff. And the list of runners running CCC is bonkers.
So if you want sorry.
Go ahead, David.
I was going to say American, this is bias hat, but Matt Daniels and Stephen Kirsch for American men are both put in incredible training, have both crushed it at Western States. And so, it's hard because there's this history in Europe where Americans often excel, and then they have won CCC. Claire's won CCC. Hayden has won CCC, but there's always this thing of like, oh, can these fast guys come over and wreck it in the mountains? And, I think this is going to be the year, not necessarily just with them, but with like across the board, that Americans really step up, and North Americans in general, like, all of our Canadian friends too, step up in a really big way. So I can't freaking wait for their experiences out there.
Sweet.
Oh, and then for women, you had Hannah Allgood on, right? At some point.
We did have Hannah. She's
Megan,
crazy, man. She's awesome.
Megan coaches her, and like, so she beat Claire this year at San Juan Solstice at a 50-miler in a sprint finish. And I'm like, that low key might have been one of the best races in the history of the sport. And we just don't know because there's not that much context, right? It was just them going at each other in the Colorado mountains. But I'm very excited, but no pressure, Hannah. You're incredible no matter what. And your future
Hannah's
is inevitable.
awesome. Yeah, Hannah's freaking awesome.
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna also shout out to Maria Dalzot as well.
Yeah.
Maria was kind enough to come support at Hamster for a little while. It's
Like
great to
days
see her
before she took off.
before she was flying. And she'll be going for her first 100K finish.
Yeah, it's her first time at that distance, but she's so talented
Yeah.
in really rugged mountains. Last thought
Way
before
back-
we make, yeah, go ahead, David.
I was going to say, way back in the day when Megan and I first came into this sport and started traveling nationally to do races, we got to be great friends with Maria and Tad. Because there used to be all these short distance series and things before the sport really started to focus more on like the UTMB style races, like La Sportiva Mountain Cup. And so we'd get to see each other every couple of weeks in some random town in Montana or California or Arizona or Colorado. And so she is a wonderful person and also wonderful at her job as a dietitian. And so really, anyone out there needing help with that, check her out.
Sweet. Maybe I was gonna do one last question before we move into maybe just a couple rapid fires, and then we'll move into the after show.
Are we gonna save them for the after show?
Yeah, we can save them for the after show too. The last question really is in regards to anyone who is maybe watching or listening to this or any of the SWAT podcasts and that kind of thing. Inevitably, there's the desire to go race internationally is going to pop up. The desire to go run UTMB, CCC, any of these TDS, that sort of thing. But there's going to be the question of like, well, how do I train for something like that I maybe have never seen before, that I've never touched foot on? What are you telling your clients that are going over and running in Europe for the first time or running first distances and how to train or at least prepare?
It's all running. And so that's really liberating. I mean, at its core, it's all about, balancing the ability to improve your running economy over time, which is a multiple year process that you're already on. And so you've already put in most of the work. And then in the 6 to 8 weeks before the race, try to get as specific as you can for the demands of it while maintaining those adaptations in the background. So what that looks like in practice is essentially you can be a weekend warrior and excel in Europe, and by that, I mean, on the weekends, trying to optimize your vert totals to get the very steep downhills in particular that are unique to Europe. And if you can do that, if you can make it so that you can run down 1,000-foot steep descent and not have your legs be sore the next day, you're golden. And that's a little complicated how you do in training. Like, I think this is where it comes in handy of understanding the science of downhill running, and that the repeated bout effect is key to harness as much as you can to get the adaptation stimulus that will make Europe feel like your backyard trails. But that in practice might look like you have to do some wild runs if you live in a place that doesn't have big mountains, of finding the steepest hill you can have, going up and down it to the point that you're sore for 4 days after for the first time. And then eventually you don't get that way, and treating the weekends 6 to 8 weeks before like that. And if you do that and balance it with overall well-rounded training, you can absolutely rock it over there. Also be really good at hiking, because everyone's hiking. Like I was talking to end of it. I can talk about this. I was talking to Matt Daniels, and he was like, yeah, and he's just talking to me as a friend. He's like, I think I hike faster than most people run. And I'm like, yeah, you do, because he has dropped my ass while he's walking and I'm running as fast as I can on steep climbs. And he has these long legs. And I'm like, that's going to work well in Europe. So, we're, even for a sub 4 minute miler like Matt, like hiking's at the forefront. So it should be at the forefront for everyone going over there. And that's a skill anyone can build. And my final thing is, like, make sure that when you take these race trips, whether it's Europe, whether it's 2 hours away, that it's a vacation. If it's a business trip, it's going to not be fulfilling, even if it goes perfectly. If you go over there and you're like, I'm going to have fun, I'm going to set myself up for success and not like go for 10 miles the day before or whatever, but throughout the trip, I'm going to go to that fun restaurant. I'm going to go walking around the town a little bit and have all those memorable experiences. Then the entire memory of it is going to coalesce into this beautiful thing that, yes, the race is included, but that's one part of this really, awesome whole.
That's great advice. Yeah, I think that's awesome. Just to sort of recognize that you are traveling to this beautiful location. Like, why not enjoy all of it? Yeah. And just in regards to power hiking, and it is an absolute essential part of so much of this. Kathleen Egan, a former guest of the show, just won a recent 200 miler. She is a power hike specialist. She has hiked multiple through hikes from PCT to the Northwest Trail and all this stuff. And she just won a recent 200 because she is a expert power hiker, and she just crushed the whole field. 200 miles was like nothing for her because she's just cranking.
Yeah. And I think anybody can be a great hiker. And like, if someone thinks that that's they're deficient at hiking, we just love treadmills for it. It's sometimes hard to learn when you're outside and there's rocks and you fall into old habits. But I have an article somewhere in video of, like, we call it tread hill hiking, and what that looks like. But basically, no matter what a person's VO2 max is or what their mile PR is, if you practice this like 5 or 6 times, you'll find that your heart rate doesn't respond anymore. And you're essentially able to power hike, almost effortlessly. And so even just know that that's one of the areas where it is a really big low hanging fruit. And I think it makes a massive difference for people that really want to like hone in on mountain races. But granted, even not mountain races, like even flatter races, like 100 milers or 50 milers, or, even someone doing their first half marathon, if you hike really fast and can run downhills, you can rock almost any race.
Awesome. Our guest tonight has been the incredible David Roche. We love having him on the show. We have tons of questions that we did not get to ask during the main show, but we're going to ask those rapid fire in our after show. But David, I do want to give you the chance to let people know where they can find more about SWAP, listen to the podcast. Where can they go? What can they do?
So I didn't actually think of anything that I really wanted to say to end this. I'm obviously just ignoring your question. But what just hopped in my mind, and it's a reason that I just love you two so deeply, and you helped teach me this, is like all of us, I think, have some impulse to control what comes out of our mouth way more than we should. We have these, like, you're in the bowling alley on the duck pins and you have the gutters that are protected, and you're just like, okay, just need to stay in between and like have all these worries. And it's like, that is not the way to go through life. And seeing you guys be so willing to play and to talk and to put your own journeys out there and not worry so much about how every little thing is going to be perceived was hugely liberating for me long before we had ever met. And so that's my big message to everyone. It's like, let your freak flag fly. Have fun with your words, your jokes. Like, don't hold that stuff in, not because like it's necessary to make you more fun or anything like that, but because life, once you start opening it up to truly letting your spirit shine, you'll find that you shine in all different ways that you might never have predicted. So, I've become a better coach since doing this. I've become much better at the, like, quote unquote serious things I do because I'm being fully unserious while doing them. And so, some people might not get it. And to them, I say, fuck you. It's okay. They don't need to get it. No one needs, people don't need to get you. People don't need to get the fact that, like, you're trying to have fun in life, because just like that race trip, it's a vacation, not a business trip.
Our incredible guest, David, never ceases to wrap up a show with this wonderful little, it's a little gift wrapped up, and you open it and you take the lid off and it's like a puppy or something. It's just so perfect.
With like a little like fuck you bow on its back.
Fuck you, puppy.
Okay. And I also have to say, Some Work All Play podcast, I actually should probably mention that Megan and I have so much fun on there. And yeah, and that's all because you guys have been our model from, you've been, get this, you've been in the sport longer than we have. And you laid the groundwork for people like us to come in that might have been a little bit unconventional. And so thank you.
I will say that you guys are doing so much more than maybe you give yourself credit for. You are affecting people that are not your clients. Your message and your being has spread far and wide in the sport, and it's a wonderful thing. If you liked tonight's show, if you like it when David visits Ginger Runner Live, or if you like the banter that we tend to have with David, it's because he is so open to communication, no matter what that happens to be. He's super funny. Him and Megan are fantastic. Listen to the SWAP podcast. So if you're listening to this podcast or you're watching this show live, go to your podcast place, that podcast sit, and look for SWAP. Some work, all play.
It means something very different in certain fetish circles. So Some Work All Play podcast. And you can also check out some stuff on swapping while you're there if you're curious.
You know, why not? Some Work All Play. And then maybe after hours, look up that swap podcast that we also have in our playlist. It's great. It's so funny. But
To be after hours. You can just bring it to
hours.
noon. Whatever that thing is for you, just bring it up to noon and own it because you're perfect the way you are.
Again, David with the little box. And today it's a puppy and it says, fuck you. Open it at noon. Listen at noon or whatever. David, thank you so much. We appreciate you so much, my friend.
We love you guys so much. Can't wait for our little boy to get to meet you and meet Aunt Kim and Aunt Ethan relatively soon, hopefully.
Aunt Kim and Aunt Ethan. It's going to be fucking fantastic.
I didn't do that intentionally. Holy shit.
It's okay, because I actually, he can call me Aunt Ethan. I don't care.
It's fine.
As long as
your nieces literally call you Uncle Cat. So
yeah,
Ethan is
my nieces and nephews call me Uncle Cat. So it makes no sense. I don't care what your kid calls me, as long as it doesn't call me late for dinner. Whoa, this show.
What a great way to end the show. Yeah.
Absolutely. A disaster ending. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching Ginger Runner Live, episode 411 with the incredible David Roche. We're going to move into our after show. We have tons of questions that we're just kind of rip through with him, but we won't keep him too long because his wife is home and they like to have dinner together rather than keeping them apart. Just for tonight's live broadcast. But before we do like to recognize member of the communities who go above and beyond. We call it our GR Crew Members of the Week. I have a feeling we have a couple. Kim, who's this week's GR Crew Members?
It's Aunt Ethan.
No. Aunt Kim.
This week's GR Crew Member of the Week are numerous people. I just want to give a massive shout out to the entire GR crew that made their way up to Squamish, made their presence known, raced everything from the 50-50 to the 23K. You guys were awesome. We heard amazing stories. There's so many people that were up there that I am not going to name names because I know I will forget some, but we had GR crew from all over the world, including the I believe the only Singaporean runner to run Squamish was a GR crew member as well. So shout out to everybody. Y'all did an amazing job out there this weekend.
If you are at Squamish and you are a GR crew member, you are our GR Crew Member of the Week. We really appreciate the entire community. That's going to wrap up tonight's show. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching Ginger Runner Live. We'll be back next week with more fun, probably a post-UTMB adventure with a guest to be determined based off of this weekend's fun. But thank you so much. Go listen to Some Work All Play. Do all that good stuff. We'll see you in the after show. If you would like to join us for our after show, head on over to patreon.com/thegingerrunner. All tiers get access to the after show. It's super easy, simple way to support this channel and everything that we do. It's also a fantastic community, as we just mentioned. Thanks all. Get out there, train hard, race harder, and party the hardest. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Ginger Runner.